And today in Southern California, we have clouds to record to. It's not always that we have clouds. So, Dr. Deming's light bulb went on while under some badgering by Claire Crawford, easy for me to say, Claire Crawford, who did If Japan Can, Why Can't We? And in the late 80s, 88, 89, since she was going to do a show about Deming, she was badgering him a little bit when he said there's no substitute for knowledge. She said, what knowledge? And he said, profound knowledge. And she said, what's profound knowledge? I guess he'd never thought seriously about it. And so that prompted him to think more seriously. And I saw some early drafts where there was many as 8 things involved in the system of profound knowledge, but he finally settled on the 4. But Claire Crawford Mason is one of the people who prompted him to document what he was talking about. And Michael Tveit talks about the fact that Deming sort of worked things backwards. He came up with the 14 points, which were based on a theory, but he didn't give anybody the theory. And what he says here early in this chapter is that if you apply the system of profound knowledge to transforming from the prevailing style of management to one of optimization, the new way, the 14 points will follow automatically, naturally. So he came up with the 14 points, and then he documented the theory, which is generally a little backwards. He also offers here, which I think is really important and fascinating. This is that he came up with this theory, but one application is applying it to transforming a corporation or a government agency or a school. But he says very clearly, it says, once somebody's light bulb goes on, they will perceive new meaning to the events and numbers and interactions and everything in their life. This thing is a huge application, even if you don't apply it to transforming an organization. It's an amazing accomplishment as far as I'm concerned. I'm just disappointed he wasn't around for the last 30 years to revise it and help us understand even more. And I know, Nicole, last week you asked about the outside view, and Deming points out that system of profound knowledge allows you to take that outside view when looking at your organization and therefore be able to see things you can't see if you're looking at through the lens of your organization, because that lens is too narrow.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what some of the other things he was going to add to that? The four points in the system of profound knowledge?
Well, actually, what happened is I look at it, what he sort of did is take some of those 8 that he thought ended up being subsets of one of the other 4. And so it's not really new stuff in there. It's stuff he talks about when he writes this. And I got to see, I think, 2 different drafts of things. I probably saved them somewhere, but I have no idea how to find things on my computer because I'm not really good at organizing things. I just dump them in a folder. Then I'm left with trying to find them. But the concept was the same, but clearly when you have 8 items and trying to show those interdependencies, it becomes way more complicated. And I don't remember this as a Deming statement. I think it's more of a Edward de Bono statement when asked about six thinking hats. Somebody said, why not seven? And he said, because seven are too many and five is not enough. And so I think Deming decided, just reading what he had written, that eight was too many. And I think I saw eight and six, and then the final four. And I don't remember, except that I do clearly remember they could easily be seen as subsets of the other elements.
Oh, yeah.
He says some things here that I like too, having to do with the way people see the world. Numbers, for example. He talks about the teacher who sent out the notes saying, your kid got below average on this test. And he claims that the teacher failed to observe that about half of all the students are going to be below average, and there's not much you can do about it. We want everybody to be above average.
That's one thing we talked about years ago when I first started teaching was like, it's a weird curve because 70, which is passing, is supposed to be average, but then that you have to pass. So then, like, what is that? Yeah. Shouldn't
Yes.
the average be a B at that point?
Yeah, and it's not, and the difficulty is, no matter how you shake it, when you give a test, you're just trying to categorize, classify, rate, and rank. And the point isn't the rating and ranking, especially in education. The point is learning. Well, some of you are going to learn more than others. Yes.
Mhm.
And that's okay. Some will learn less, and that's okay. But there's something about part of it. It probably comes from science. Science started out as categorization. They started defining things, and then stuff fit in the category and it didn't. So there was all that kind of stuff going on. And but what's interesting is, as much as we have known about science for at least the past 400 years, we recognize that nothing in the universe is categorized. All the categorization is human. We decide we need categories, so we invent them. That's fine. NASA invented one called a planet, and then we changed it, and Pluto dropped out. Which, there's nothing wrong with making categories. Just don't assume that they have anything to do with the natural world, the real world. They're in your brain, and that's a fine place for them. And it allows you to manipulate them and change them, just like the boundary of a system. I think it's great. But don't get trapped in the category. Category doesn't matter. Russ Acuff used to talk about people who said, "Oh, that's a social problem. Oh, that's an economic problem. Oh, that's an engineering problem." He said, the adjective before problem says more about the viewer of the problem than anything inherent in what was going on. Yeah, they're just problems, and they have causes. Deming also talks about, I remember one of his devotees, Donald Wheeler, has written some books on numbers and statistics and that sort of stuff. and Wheeler is adamant about the fact that statistical process control has nothing to do with statistics, nothing to do with process control. It's a way to decide whether the thing you're looking at is stable, because if it's stable, it's predictable and manageable. If it's not stable, until you stabilize it, you have no idea what it's going to do next. And he's saying the numbers are useful in helping you do that. But people get tied up. And he also, Deming points out, as does Wheeler, that no matter how much you have in the way of data and how well you think you understand it, when you make a prediction about the future, that prediction you can feel very comfortable about, or a little bit comfortable about, or uncomfortable about, but you cannot assign a statistical probability to say I'm 95% sure. There's nothing statistical about it, because what you're doing is looking at what happened in the past, and looking at the future is a judgment. Am I going to get the same results as the past? And that judgment comes from understanding whether the cause and effect relationships that existed in the past are going to be existing in the future in a similar way. And that has nothing to do with statistics. It has to do with your subject matter expertise. And your prediction could be wrong. And it might be right, but it might be right for the wrong reasons. So prediction data can be useful, but when you make a prediction, it's not about the data, it's about your knowledge and your level of belief that the things that interacted in the past to create the results are going to be the same or better than the things that the things that interact in the past are going to repeat, or better things are going to repeat out into the future. But that's a prediction, and it always has the chance of being wrong. I remember somebody asking, I think they were asking Wheeler, how long does a good prediction last? And he said, until you find a better one. I think Newton's laws of physics lasted 400 years. That's pretty good length for a theory. But some theories last more like 400 days, which is okay, because we're never going to know everything for sure. So it's always a theory, and frequently it can be improved upon. And that's how the learning happens. Deming points that out over and over again. The way knowledge is built is by having a theory, in essence, testing that theory and making adjustments to it based on experience. So you have a theory compared to experience, and adjust your theory based on what you find. And over time, you grow a deeper and deeper understanding of things.
I think that's what tiny children do all the time, right?
Yeah.
They do something stupid. Well, at least I did as a child. Do something stupid, fall down, get hurt. No, don't do that again. Uh,
I discovered a graphic example. I was going out filming Brendan, probably 8 years old. He was out in the cul-de-sac where we live, practicing, inventing and practicing skateboard tricks. And I was watching, and the plan, do, study, act is you have a theory and you plan a way to test the theory, then you do the testing, then you evaluate the results, and then you make adjustments or abandon the theory. And it was very clear that was the process he was going through. And some of his feedback was rather painful. And you could see where he'd say, you could see at a point where he just try another way, maybe do this, maybe do that. But you could also see a point where he just abandoned the whole thing and say, this isn't getting me anywhere. I'm not doing this one anymore. But you're right. And Deming talks about that. That's how people learn. That is the mechanism for learning. And poor Chanticleer the rooster learned. He did. His theory was that he crowed every morning and the sun came up, and then one morning he overslept and the sun was still up, so he had to revise his theory. I also
Think
find it
about how many
interesting.
times that happens with management.
Yeah, the thing I noticed about management is they don't have a theory, so there's nothing to revise. what they used to tell me every time something went wrong is that the system was broken. And I kept telling them, the system produced that. It's not broken. That's one of the things it does is it makes that happen. They said, no, it's broken. I said, it's not what you want, but it's not broken. Your system does this. If you don't like what's going on, change your system. Oh, no, the system's good. Somebody broke it. No. I also like the fact that the PhD in mathematical physics says for any observation you can make or any measurement of the physical world you can make, there's no true value. All you can have is an agreed to value. And out of the crisis, he has like 12 different ways they measure the speed of light at different times, from the maybe earlier than the 1800s through the 1900s. And you can show the different range, different averages. And the question is, what's the speed of light? So, well, which one of these methods of measurement do you want to use? Do you want to take the average? Do you want to take the high? You want to take the low? You want to take the mean? You just agree to the measurement system and what value you're going to take from that. Does that mean you know the true value of the speed of light? Absolutely not. You know that measured value, and you're agreeing that we're going to use that value.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that doesn't come up often, in fact, Deming's the only one I remember talking about it, is that when you're talking about knowledge, he says it has temporal spread, meaning what your knowledge is today may change by tomorrow. So that old knowledge was good enough for then, but it's not. You've got new knowledge, which is better, that you're using now. So the temporal spread is important to recognize. Otherwise, you come to the conclusion that once you've got a theory that works pretty well, you never have to change it. So, well, that's probably not a way to learn. The way to learn is to keep applying the theory and finding out where and when it fails. Like Euclidean geometry works really well on tables, and it doesn't work too badly on the sphere of the earth if you're building a house that's not too tall. But if you're building a bridge that's rather tall and rather long, Euclidean geometry ain't going to help. You need spherical geometry because the earth is closer to a sphere. So the Euclidean geometry is very useful in all kinds of ways, but it gets to a point where it fails and you have to use a different theory, a different geometry. And the way you learn is to keep applying your theory until it slaps you upside the head and says, it ain't going to work there. So, okay, well, if I want it to work there, I need a different theory and I need to come up with it and test it. And then if that works, we'll start using that theory when we hit this circumstance. Newtonian physics works pretty well for everybody except somebody who's messing with the vastness of the universe and the smallness of quantum mechanics. For everybody else, Newton's works just fine.
I think that also highlights the danger of copying, and it probably also emphasizes the importance of variation and understanding variation, in the sense that because of the variation, it's impossible for you to know everything that's happening within the system probably at any time.
Yeah, even the simplest mechanical systems are a lot simpler than social systems and life systems and those things. So you got even the simplest mechanical system with only a few parts and a few interdependencies you get variation in the performance all the time. And trying to figure out of the hundreds, if not thousands of things you could look at and measure all at the same time, says, no, you're going to get variation within this range. And as long as the range stays the same, you can predict the performance of that system out into the future. But going back and figuring out all those little bumps up and down within the range of 3 sigma, you probably couldn't figure it out even if you tried, because there's just way too many things that are interacting. And being able to measure all of them at the same time is not going to work very well. This chapter also introduces something, and I don't read a lot of other people's work about statistics. So the people I know about Wheeler, Don Wheeler, and people, the Hiro Hackaborn, and people that worked with Dr. Deming, Gypsy Rani, and people like that. The only place that I've heard talk about enumerative studies and analytical problems is the people who've worked with Deming. He's looking at it and he says, a whole bunch of statistics, you're trying to do a count. So you're planting a bunch of wheat in Kent, Washington in 4 different fields with 4 different kinds of seed. And you go through the planting and the harvesting, and then you might use some sampling to decide which of those fields, which seeds produce the best results. And you get an answer. That's an enumerative study, and it gives you information and it's useful. But it doesn't make the prediction that next year, if you use the wheat seed that worked the best, when you did this experiment in Kent, Washington, and you planted that seed, that would give you the same better results, because it doesn't depend on what happened last year. It depends on what happens that year you plant it. And it gets even worse if you move to Kent, England, which is close to London, and you plant it there. A lot of the bets are off as to which of those seeds will perform. And what Deming points out is there's nothing wrong with those enumerative studies. But the most important things management needs to decide on are, if I change from method A to method B, is that going to be better in the future? And there's no amount of statistics that will tell you that. It's a different kind of analysis. And confusing the two, Deming claims a whole bunch of statisticians confuse them and think they can apply all their numbers they learned from a experiment of a given frame to stuff out in the future, and he just says they're wrong. He even calls some of what they do a terrible restriction to understanding of statistics.
So I tried to do something like that in my school because we're having a terrible, terrible attendance problem. So I had the attendance person pull the data from the last year. And I created this really wonderful run chart. And I'm like, according to our system, we are within the limits of this system of attendance. And so many teachers were fighting me on it, and people were fighting me on it. And they kept saying, like, well, but then this kid, da, 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 da. And I was like, within this system and our student population, we're fine. Like, this is what we expect. 50,
Nothing's changed.
85% attendance on a daily, an average day.
This is how this system performs.
Right.
If the system were somewhere else, it might perform differently. If you changed it, it might perform differently. But this is what this one does. And the good news is it's predictable.
With those kids from the last year. Yes.
And I used to talk to people about that. I said, since systems are unpredictable, you can make predictions and they can easily be wrong, but your prediction is made out of a theory, and they all look at you like you're crazy. And Bill used to ask him to talk to him about the fact that they use theory every day, and they're looking at him like, we don't use theory at all. What are you talking about? So Bill asks, how many of you drove in today? Like classroom of 35, there'll be at least 25 Southern California, maybe 30 with their hands up. And he says, where are you going to look for your car when you get ready to go home? Where I parked it. He says, that's a theory.
That it
And
will still be there? Or
you'll keep operating to that theory until you go out one day and your car's not there where you left it. So, well, maybe I need a new theory, or maybe something different happened. The wife came by and grabbed it. The husband came by and grabbed it. Somebody stole it. Somebody towed it away. But the idea is we work on a theory all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Every time we look at what we're going to do tomorrow, a whole bunch of that is a theory. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. Sometimes that works out, and sometimes not so well. I also like in this chapter where I like when he gets people who have bumped into things tell their stories, like the lady who had her son suddenly decide washing the dishes every night would be good. Then she thought it was a good idea. Her light bulb went on and said, I had to reward him for that. So she's rewarded him and he quit washing the dishes. And Deming's explanation is he was doing it because he wanted to. He was doing it because he loved her. She changed the relationship by paying him for it. And there's the one in the earlier chapter, the kid that did it was so happy he could do a science project. So he did one, turned it in, and then later that night after it's turned in, he went to school with his parents, and they were looking at all the science projects on display, and some of them had ribbons on them, and his didn't. So he didn't do another science project for 5 years because by the time he hit 8th grade, it was required. And we look at the psychology of things and say, Alfie Kohn's idea that rewards motivate people to work for rewards. They lose focus on everything else. It's only the reward. And boy, those stories about the kids, the one not doing a science project and the one giving up washing the dishes, those really tug at my heartstrings. Yeah, you get it. This is not a quo pro thing. This is a love and a relationship thing. Let's keep it like that.
yeah, or you get kids that just negotiate to get stuff done because that's what they've learned from their system.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And Alfie Kohn points out one of the bad things about, and Deming talks about the destroying our people. One of the bad things about people chasing rewards is that their self-confidence becomes dependent upon them beating other people at something. And that's a terrible thing for your self-confidence to be built on, because a whole bunch of the world's going to be way better at whatever thing you're doing than you are. So you got to have something else to build up your self-confidence. But you can easily lapse into that. If I'm not winning, if I'm not beating somebody, then I'm not worth anything. Really? I like Alfie's statement that I can knit a sweater that that I'm very pleased with, and I will wear it and show it off, and it doesn't have to be better than the one you made. It's not a contest. We do make a lot of things contests.
What would be your thoughts on the transformation being discontinuous?
Oh, yeah. That's continuous curve would be like a bell-shaped curve. It's continuous. But when you have discontinuity, that means there's a jump, a hiccup, if you will. The curve's moving along and then it jumps up, or it's moving along and then it drops down. And so what Deming's pointing out is that a lot of learning is a continuous curve. You take information or you take data and you can mess with it and turn it into information. That's kind of a continuous thing. You can take that information and turn it into know-how, so you know how to do something. You can take that know-how and turn it into knowing why and understanding. All that's a nice continuum. But then there's a discontinuous part, because the next step is wisdom. Wisdom, if you use Akoff's definition, is doing something in the present and recognizing how it's going to affect the future. And that's a jump. That's a discontinuity. A lot of people can work in those first four areas and do very well, but that doesn't give them the thing that's most important, which is the ability to say, when we do this, here's what's likely to happen in the future, and be accurate about that. That's the wisdom. And frankly, I've been thinking about lately, the more and more I learn about AI, the more and more I know it's never going to have wisdom. It's only going to have all the data, information, and know-how and knowing why. It's going to have all of that. But that doesn't allow you to look out in the future and say, and here's what's going to happen or might happen tomorrow. And that discontinuity, it comes from what Deming's talking about. He says, if you're not exposed to his ideas, then it's hard for you to grasp what he's talking about. But if you're exposed to his ideas and the light bulb goes on, boom, that's the discontinuity. You've been living your life doing all these things, and you get exposed to this, your light bulb goes on. Now you behave differently based on your new view of the world. It's not a natural thing following one step from another. It's not a logic thing. It's oh my gosh, it's a perception thing. Oh my gosh, this seems better than what I've been doing. That's also that discontinuity and that change, that leap that happens. That's why Deming says when your light bulb has gone on, you can help other people. And one of the ways you help them is not feeling guilty about the past. Because what they did in the past was based on what they knew in the past. So now that they know more, they can't go beat themselves up because they didn't know it 2 years ago or 10 years ago. But that discontinuity is the key. It's the innovation, if you will. It's the thing that allows you to see things you haven't seen before. Things that were there all the time, you just couldn't see them. In the US, we have trouble seeing how much cooperation there is in this world of capitalism and competition. There's cooperation all over the place, and it's invisible because when people are looking at things, it's Tom Johnson knows Myron Tribus, I think, who said, when you look at something, what you see depends upon what you thought before you looked. So if you're looking to see where the competition is, you're going to find competition everywhere. But if you look to see where the cooperation is, you're going to find it everywhere too. And at least in the States, we don't spend much time looking for cooperation. Deming uses examples in that early chapter where those two filling stations, gas stations on a corner near him, they each stayed open on a different night during the week. So they weren't both open at the same time, but somebody was always open in that neighborhood, which served the neighbors well and served them well. And one of them had two tow trucks and one only had one. The guy that had two would loan if one of his trucks was free and his competition across the street had a call, but his truck was out, he would loan him, the competition would loan him his truck so he could go get service at one of his customers. And that cooperation made both those companies better off than if they competed with each other, open every night, and no, you're not using my truck. You got to deal with the fact that you only have one truck. That's your problem. And showing how much cooperation there is. Another cooperation that I see it really strongly in aerospace, and somehow it's invisible to a whole bunch of people. All of the standards that we agree to, we're going to make our products to, the agreement on those standards is a huge amount of cooperation. And it's very useful. So that when you buy a certain kind of steel,
it reduces cost significantly too. Because I mean, even if you use another example, like with phones right now, when they transferred with the charging, when you had like multiple chargers, when your charger gone bad, you used to have to find the original back, and it cost the customers so much. And it's the same thing in aerospace. When persons making parts and components differently, you then can't. There's no interruptibility between and cooperation. So sometimes, like I said, it's invisible, but you have to make it visible too.
Yes.
It's also a feature of luxury brands to be different, but for the rest of us and the rest of the world, it's not a feature.
Even Apple has managed with a lot of its cables and plugs to decide that you don't have to buy Apple products to use their damn phone.
I wish we could get there in education. So I'm in Texas. A lot of the US uses Common Core standards for education, not Texas, because we know better, whatever. But I'm from California, so I do what I want. But it's kind of ridiculous that a student could go, if they have to move states or something, they kind of are all getting similar standards except for Texas. And I think there's a couple other states that have to do their own thing.
Yeah, and the downside we have is as Russ has pointed out, and as well as others, and Deming even pokes at it, is the trouble is the system is not about learning, it's about delivering curriculum. Well, it's okay to deliver curriculum, but if the people you're delivering it to aren't interested in learning it, it's pretty much pointless. So the first step is to figure out what they want to learn and then help them learn that. But everything's based, and I didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize it till I was well into my 8 years of teaching. I said, everything they taught me in college has nothing to do with learning, but it has a lot to do with delivering curriculum. And I didn't even like the curriculum they were giving me to deliver. I didn't think it was important for anybody to know. I said, what difference does it make if you can name all the parts of speech in a sentence and diagram the sentence? I said, what's the point of being able to do that if you can't write a cogent paragraph?
Well, didn't Deming say that in the chapter 2 about using a dictionary, but it's not going to make a paragraph appear or something like that?
Yeah, I couldn't believe the head of the English department badgered me about not teaching grammar. I said, I'm too busy. I'm teaching them how to write. I have to correct their papers every day. And he says, well, people who write well are good at grammar. And I said, well, that makes perfect sense to me. And he said, so you're going to start teaching grammar? And I say, no, it makes sense to me because those people can write well. They can explain what they wrote, which is what grammar is doing. So, but just because you can explain what somebody else wrote doesn't mean you can write. It's a whole different skill. So I'm teaching him writing. He was not happy. But I think that was what I finally felt was part of my job, both in education and then when I started working in industry, is see if I could get management to be unhappy because maybe I motivate them to change something. It didn't work in the school system, I can tell you. That thing has a rubber band like you can't believe. And so you can stretch it and you can get really strong and stretch it further. And then anywhere from 1 week to a year later, it snaps right back to where it was, right exactly back to where it was. And I said, holy cow. That's frustrating. But the kids are a lot of fun.
I do love them. Yes, they are fun. They are very, very fun.
Oops. My computer was taking a nap. Oh, yeah.
I think one of the things also that kind of stands out in the chapter, how it builds on the last chapter in terms of information about understanding a system. I think this chapter also sort of reinforces those lessons and goes a bit further in terms of building out an understanding, especially around even the whole question of psychology. Typically when people think of systems, they think about the components, they think about how it's broken into parts, but quite often persons ignore those human factors and the people element and how that interaction with the people factors in. And we do a lot of things to try to manipulate people. But we could do a better job in terms of, even the example you were giving earlier about the over justification scenario with regards to paying someone for doing something that they actually did just for the love of doing it and stuff like that. So I think that kind of emphasis on the whole psychology bit and showing that it's actually connected to variation kind of shows too that understanding the variation is also about how we manage, how we lead, how we connect with people, as opposed to it just being a technical element and component. And I think that also helps to reinforce the whole understanding about systems and system design and evolution in and transformation in this kind of Deming lens.
Yeah, Deming was familiar with the Hawthorne experiments. I don't know if you guys are, back in the 30s, where they wanted to test if, treating people in a certain way would get them to perform better. And so I don't remember how many of the women were making the circuit boards at the time, how many women were in the experiment, but this one group of women, I don't know, it's 8, 12, however many women, they they said, oh, we're going to watch how you do things and pay close attention. So they changed the amount of lighting to make it brighter, and the production went up. And the next week they changed it to go lower, and the production went up. The then the next week they changed something else and the production went up. And this went on for like 13 weeks. And then they went back to the way they had been doing things before with, just let individual people do individual things and get individual rewards for them. And the performance had gone up from, I don't know, like 2,000 units a week to 3,000 units a week, or 2,500 to 3,000. And even when they went back to the old way of doing it, the 3,000 production rate continued because those people had learned to work together and support each other and interact with each other. So the production rate had little to do with all the other stuff that the organization thought they were doing to motivate workers, and everything to do with them feeling like they all belonged to the same team and all had each other's backs. And that's huge. And unfortunately, a whole bunch of the stuff we do in schools and in organizations and in government agencies is, in essence, destroying the people, not helping them work together, not helping them learn from each other and feel like they're part of something bigger. It puts them at odds with each other, in competition with each other. There's no reason to help anybody else. It's crazy.
I think because even this whole understanding about the delayed effects of an action or a decision, that you could take an action today, but the effect of that actually shows up well down the line. So it also shows that, hey, we can't be overreacting to each and everything that we see, especially as it relates to how people behave and respond to different stimuli that comes from outside.
Yeah, the last paragraph in this chapter pokes a lot at the prevailing style of management. He says he's talking about rewarding people and how that affects the work, and he said, and Deming's talking about rating and ranking, and he's saying, even if you could find a way that could legitimately separate out what the system causes are from the individual, and you could figure that out with perfect clarity by whatever you were doing, he says, why would you suppose that being able to do that would make either those people or the system better?
She posted that on LinkedIn, I think last week.
Yes, you can be very precise about everything you're doing. And how is that better?
There's no right way to do the wrong thing.
Deming, the system of profound knowledge, but even moreover, Deming's belief in the human spirit is something that fascinates me, because it's something that is so important, and we seem to be missing it all over the place. We just can't see how important the people and the interaction among the people, how important that is. And we miss it. The human resources departments are a joke in corporations. They have nothing to do with human resources. They have to do with keeping track of whatever the rules and regulations are and making sure the company doesn't get sued. But they have nothing to do with building human relationships. And if the human relationships are built and the people are supporting each other and focused on a common aim, holy cow, you don't have to do a lot of measurement and a lot of motivation and anything else. Stuff starts to take care of itself.
Back when I was responsible for leading transformation, well, part of it was leading transformation in the services, the correction services in Trinidad. I recall that in the task force reports, that was actually one of the recommendations to start moving away from performance appraisal. And because the fact of the matter is, even though you had a system, nobody wasn't doing it. Nobody. Nobody wasn't even in on an annual basis. So a lot of efforts. I remember we expended a lot of money in trying to fix and even do we did a 360 type evaluations. We attempted to
Yeah.
have the staff evaluate leadership and all of that, just expanding, and all of these things just break down after the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to securing promotions and all of those things, people want the performance appraisal system, even though box 3, where I mean we did statistical analysis on everything. That's why the task force actually came up with, let's just get rid of this this burden and try to do better leadership and guidance and supervision and periodic reviews and review as a team based performance review. And boy, oh boy, even when it was accepted around the table, when it came down to, because the point-based system is part of your promotions system, there's this big dichotomy. People don't want to go away from the ticking the boxes, even if the box is box 3, which everybody was getting box 3, that you meet expectations. That is basically what the box 3 means. You meet expectations. And just, I mean, it was so uncommon for a person to get a box 4 or box 5, but we did just love the box 3 because I guess it was easier for the supervisor to just say that, oh, you meet expectations, and saying it, you didn't meet it, or you had some superior performance or some kind of thing like that, because nobody could differentiate what you were doing that was outside of,
Yep.
what us as a batch could achieve together or anything like that, so it is that performance thing is always going to be a fight, because some of it also embedded into the laws.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
but we eliminated that in like our company. We didn't do that. And even when I went to the Caribbean Well Services, we eliminated that altogether. We found much better ways of making persons sit together and discuss performance, than trying to tick boxes and trying to find heroes.
Yeah. I used to, every time I took a course, they online, they'd have a thing at the end where you're supposed to rate or rate the course according to a bunch of different things. And they always use one about meeting or exceeding expectations. My answer has always been, you met my expectations, but that's probably because they're very, very low. I don't expect much from the stuff you're giving me. And I didn't get much out of it. So I think everything's pretty much equal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the whole thing about trying to break things down into the individual performance reviews are, in essence, trying to improve the system by improving the parts taken separately. It's not going to work. Even if you manage to do what you think is improving everybody's individual activity, it's not going to make the system better. It might even make it worse, because it's about how things. In a later chapter, Deming has where he shows A plus P plus A plus B plus C plus D. Those are people. Then he shows the interactions, A, B, A, C, A, D. And when you look at an organization, even only 10 people, the interactions are huge compared to the individuals. And the thing you need to work on are improving those interactions, those interdependencies. That's what'll make things better.
I think
And it's where the
what it end up
leverage
breeding,
is.
what
What's
what it
that?
end up breeds, it end up breeding this whole lack of cooperation and sharing of information. That actually becomes a fundamental part of the culture where you
Yeah,
don't share information that you feel is going to give you a competitive advantage over
yeah,
others. So you may see something, you may observe something, but you would not share that because you believe that that is going to give you the difference. So sharing of information was that anybody who doing that in the system was an outlier,
yeah.
because everybody's really competing for you know, that seniority and promotion and because that built into what you do, that built into how we how you were trained to operate, and this feeling of everybody's better than everybody, that was the culture, so to me, and it was bred by that whole system of the performance review, connecting it with promotions, all of that. That that is where that stemmed from.
Yeah, I remember when I first started working for industry, every year they'd give us some something to fill out that was, what do you want to do in the future, et cetera, et cetera. And after 2 years, it was clear to me they believed I wanted to be CEO or helping me do the things that could I check all the boxes so I could work my way up to be CEO. And I was thinking, I don't want to be CEO. I don't want to have anything to do with that. I'm a technical person. I want to be over here. What the hell? Why are you giving me this stuff? But that was what they thought everybody wanted. Everybody wants to go up the ladder. And I said, well, I don't mind making more money, but I don't want to be in charge of the damn corporation. Doesn't matter. We're gonna show you how to get there. It's not where I want to go. We're doing the same thing with the kids in school. We're not asking where they want to go and taking them there. We're telling them where they want to go. And some of them aren't having it. They're saying, no, not really. I don't care that that's where you want me to go. I'm not interested.
That's true.
Yes, so I guess competition is like it's sort of like saying anti-cooperation. Then is that sort of
It's not exactly. Deming has a chart where he talks about if people have the same aim and the same method of achieving that aim, they will naturally cooperate. If their aims are different, they will compete. So they won't cooperate, they're going to be competing. So you need the same aims, but you also need the same means, because if they don't have the same means, they're going to be competing over which means to use to get to achieve the purpose. So what you're after is working with the organization to help people understand the purpose of the organization, how they fit in the purpose of what they're doing, and how that relates to the purpose of everybody they're interacting with. And that's not easy to do, especially as the organization grows. but that's the key. Common aim and a common purpose and a common method for achieving that purpose. And then you get cooperation. You don't have to do anything. The cooperation comes automatically.
One of the biggest to me internal kind of competition that you could actually set is budget. When people are competing for budget and resources, and where one department feel that they are more important in the system than others.
Yeah.
All right. And then even worse, what compounds that is when they actually get the resources that they don't share it with possibly others who may need it. And we had a lot of that. When it came down to budget, is who could actually represent their case better for greater investment. You should get that investment. And that, to me, that was the foundation for that, that separation, that, feeling of more importance than the others, and resources not being shared. And to me, it was quite often the kind of source of not achieving your aim, because the aim of the organization um, to put what you'll say, protect, correct, and reintegrate persons no longer became the focus. The aim became, oh, how am I going to try to make my life better by getting the resources I need to do my job, and to hell with who else don't get theirs to do their job. Yeah, um, so you start working on different objectives. You start working on, oh, my department's objective. And whether that is a destruction to the whole doesn't matter. Or then perceptions of who perceives this to be more important than another activity, until people start recognizing that other activity is actually important to actually complete your job as well. So those interconnections are no part of, quite often, and that's actually a big part of budget culture in a lot of places. When I go as a consultant in a lot of places, that competitive budget process is pervasive.
Yeah, the common purpose is really important in helping people understand how they fit into it. The super sports teams that go on to be champions, the coaches are able to get those people to recognize in the team, to recognize it's about them together, not any one of them as an individual. And teams that are able to do that certainly do very well. And teams that are busy making competing with each other instead of helping each other don't do nearly as well. It's hard in an organization. Deming in this chapter also has the idea of interdependency, and the bowling team that's not all that interdependent in the orchestra. I found something that this Winter Olympics going on that's even less interdependent than bowling. The two skiers form a team, and one skier is a downhill skier, and one's a slalom skier. And they each run their two separate events, and they add the times together, and that's a team composition. there's not much interdependency there. It's two entirely different things, and they add the times together. And I said, well, okay, they can call that a team event if they want. It just doesn't seem much like not much interdependence there.
As you were talking about natural cooperation between organizations and they have to have the same aim, the one thing that came to mind for me that I've always seen, because I've volunteered for a lot of these organizations that always do well, are animal rescue organizations. because they all do have that exact same aim. And if they can't take an animal, they will call everybody else in the area to see what will happen. So, like, they do pick up each other's slacks. If they get extra donations, they will share with other organizations. Be nice if, corporate America could do that too.
Yeah, it's and it's not inherent in corporations or any organization, government, industry, education, that they behave the way they're behaving. It's that the mental models are stuck, and they're stuck where they've been stuck for probably 100 years, maybe longer. But Deming is trying to change the mental model. And without a change of the mental model, we're doing about as well as we can do. This is what this system does. This is it. If you're hoping for more, you can hope, but it's not much of a strategy. We have to change something, and change is always difficult. And it's particularly difficult if you can't get that you have to get the light bulbs on. It's the individual transformation Deming's talking about. You have to have people like you talked about, the people who are so fond of the animals, getting to the rescue them. Everything takes care of itself. Even if it's something they can't do, they are going to figure out how to make something happen. And that's kind of cooperation is possible in any kind of organization. It just requires a mental model change, which is slow in coming, very slow in coming. A lot of us have talked about the fact that transforming an existing operation from prevailing style of management to what Deming's talking about is probably more difficult than starting from scratch and building your own organization. But building your own organization is tough too, because every time you bring on another person, you have to enculturate them into your view of the world. And if you build fast enough and you don't enculturate the people, you're going to get to a point where you're pretty much like what everybody else is like. So it isn't easy to do. But
Well, I saw that too in Leander ISD that's close to me that does like David Langford. They used to do all the trainings
yeah,
with him and
yeah,
everything. They're not like that anymore. Like
no,
they added X number of schools very quickly. They stopped training people. I think they got a new superintendent. So yeah, what was a good schooling organization is now not. It's a standard schooling organization again,
yes, it's that
which
rubber
is
band snapping everything
unfortunate.
back. Holy cow.
Oh yeah. So
You
how
know,
would you, or I'd like advice from anybody to like, how would anybody try to explain? Here's my situation. I have to talk to a lawyer that's team keeps screwing up something and like messing up stuff for me. And I am going to have a meeting with this lawyer, but I have to try to explain to the lawyer, like, this is your team. You are responsible for what they are doing, they aren't doing, training, whatever. But how do I kind of explain management and thinking and someone who's probably like, well, that person messed up, not me.
yeah, it isn't easy. It's when you're trying to help somebody transform. Uh, Edward de Bono, the Six Thinking Hats guy, had a great observation. When you're dealing with somebody and there's a perceptual problem, logic is of no help because it's not a logic problem. It's a how they
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
world problem. So you try to ask questions that'll make them think about how they're viewing the world right now, and then say, "Well, I might reconsider that." One of the ones I used to work with executives is get them to tell me what they wanted out of their employees. Oh, I want them to be competent. I want them to, you know, pitch in and do the good work for everybody. I want them to be self-sufficient, all that stuff. And I said, oh, okay. how do you make that happen? Well, you know, rewards and recognitions and all that stuff, promotions. So, okay. So what do you want from your kids? Well, I want them to be, you know, independent. I want them to learn for themselves. I want them to be contributors to the world around them. Oh, you do that by rewards and recognition? Oh, no, what the hell? So you don't hand out birthday presents and Christmas presents based based on the statistics you're taking on the kids? No, who would do that? I said, I don't know. I'm just asking.
Anybody that believes in
are very
Santa?
different things. You want the same results and you're doing very different things. You might want to consider doing whatever you do at home, at work. No, but that's the pointing out things that are hard to explain with the existing system, and you have another view that can help with that. And then you can't cause the light bulb to go on and them to shift, but sometimes you can get them to start thinking about whether what they're doing makes any sense or not.
Mm-hmm.
They logically they can't support it. None of the executives would logically support rewarding his wife and his kids based on any kind of measurement he was making. None of them. So, but you support it over here. So that, and sometimes the best I've seen, the thing that's helped the most is when somebody asks, well, what could I do instead? Because that's an invitation. And Deming always said, new knowledge comes from outside and by invitation. And that's an invitation. And so what could I do instead? Hey, how about this? And you can even offer that if they aren't saying, what could I do instead? If you challenge them and they don't say, what could I do instead? You could say, have you thought of other ways or other things you could do instead that might give you different results? And they can say yes or no. And it's the idea is you're trying to keep asking questions to keep them thinking about reviewing and considering whether or not what they're doing makes any sense or whether there's something better. Not even that what they're doing is wrong, just that there might be something better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another good question to ask. So you don't think it could go any better? This
I
is
like
as
that
good
one.
as it gets, huh? So what else strikes you? Any, oh my gosh, I didn't see that last time I read this?
I think my big one was looking at the 4 points and thinking, is there something that could be added to this list with all the changes in technology? But I feel like some of that, even like AI, as you were saying, can't really think for itself. So you have to take that as a different and little subsystem added to your system. Um,
Yeah, I think AI fits probably mostly in mostly under it's a knowledge thing, but it's also tends to be a system, but it's a knowledge thing, and it can build, as I said, information, data and information and knowledge, but that's different from wisdom. And you need at least those other things to build the wisdom, because even if you have a bunch of data and information, if you don't know if you don't know what you're trying to learn, you don't even know what to do with the data. So what are you trying to learn? What is your goal? What's your purpose? Everything starts with purpose. Deming mentions that when he says, you can't even, when somebody tells me my job is to wash a table, I can't do a good job unless they tell me why I'm washing the table. because why is that purpose is huge. And individuals, when the organization they're in doesn't give them a purpose, they invent their own. And what else would you expect? People want to make a difference. And if you set up the organization so that they have the ability to help each other make bigger differences, they will help each other make bigger differences. But if you set it up so they don't even know what their purpose is and they're busy saying, well, I think this is my purpose, so I'm going to do really good at this and beat the hell out of everybody else who tries to do anything like this. Well, that is a way of doing things. It's just not. It's like the guy on the soccer team that thinks his job is to score goals. So every time he touches the ball, he shoots. Well, sometimes you're 50 yards away. It's probably not a good idea to be shooting. But you can see people who learn to work together. Like that's one of the things I like about really good football, soccer teams. You see a person making a run 40 yards running toward a corner flag, not because she's expecting maybe to get clear and receive the ball, but to create a space behind her where a teammate can move in and get the ball and take a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Now that run of 40 yards doesn't show up anywhere in the statistics. Gets her worn out because she's running all the time. And yet it's what it is that all those players doing things like that help those really good teams win a whole bunch of games. The job of you as a teammate is to help your teammates be better. I remember Magic Johnson years ago when Colby was a star, but he hadn't been the super duper star yet. And Magic said, Colby's not as good as he could be. He needs to learn to make the people he's playing with better. And he did. He did learn that. But that's huge. You can be really good. You can be great. You can be fabulous. But your job is to make everybody around you better. And soccer has some plays that makes that really obvious. Like a guy running at the ball to take a shot, takes his foot back like he's going to kick it, then lets the ball roll on the guy behind him. So all the defense is collapsed on this guy who's got his foot back to take a shot, and suddenly somebody else is with the ball and nobody around him. Boom, ball's in the net. I might see in the next couple of days, I might look through and see if I can dig out the old look for SOPK, the earlier look. I'll see if I can find that. I'm not even sure which computer or drive to look in, but that's what I need AI for. I need to dump all my shit into an AI system so I can
Have it
find
organize it.
I really like books, and I'm not as fond of electronic books, but there are some books I want to have electronically because I can't remember where everything is in the book, and being able to search it is really useful. And back in the early days, so this is like 1994, I didn't see a Kindle version of this, the new economics. So I PDF'd every page and transferred it to Word and dumped it in a file so I have an electronic book. It's really useful. All right, so next time around, which is what, the 18th? Yes, we're going to look at chapter 5 and 6. And chapter 5 is leadership, and 6 is the management of people. So those are sort of related. I find it interesting that chapter 5 is the shortest chapter in the book, which might say that Deming's view of management is rather simple. It doesn't take much to explain it. Here's what it is. It's not complicated at all. Or it might be just coincidental that it's the shortest chapter.
It had to be taken with the whole.
I do like that both Deming and Russ Acuff make a distinction between leader and management, if you will. Leadership is one thing, but it's not a title. Management is a title. You're given authority by the organization and some responsibility. But leader, anybody can be a leader. As Deming points out and Russ talks about, a leader is somebody who has an idea and can get others on board, help support that idea and make something useful happen. And it doesn't mean a manager can't be a leader, but a leader is something different from a manager. A manager is a position in the organization, has a job description, has a pay scale and all that stuff. Leader doesn't. Anybody in the organization can lead.
Except for in education, they call themselves leadership.
I know. They do it. They do it.
They
They do it in
do.
the corporation too.
Yeah.
The Boeing had a huge space that they really nice facility for training all of its management, and some of the rest of us who underlings got to go to some of those training sessions. And it's a wonderful facility and a wonderful place to be, and it's called the Leadership Center.
Funny
We send
enough,
all the managers to our Leadership Center. Why don't you send everybody to the Leadership Center?
But funny enough, education is like the hardest place to change, right? Is one of the slowest. Yeah, is one of the slowest. Education hasn't changed much since the 1800s.
No, because they used to let kids learn what they wanted to learn a lot.
Yep.
Back then. Well, I guess when they weren't working in factories.
Yeah, and
But you're right.
You would think as we get higher up that in the doctorate programs and the advanced degree programs it'd be better. But as Deming points out, in business management, for example, we're not teaching what these people need to be doing to make our future better. We're teaching them what everybody did in the past. So, well, if the future is going to repeat like the past did, then that might be useful, but there's not much. You'd be hard put to say what happened in the last 50 years is pretty much going to mirror what's going to happen the next 50. I doubt it. Well, then why are you teaching them what they did in the last 50? I don't see how that helps.
Education typically likes to add, but not take away.
Yeah.
So
true.
so that's why a lot of the curriculum becomes overburdened, and then people say, "Oh, we can't teach everything," because I actually used to work in the accreditation body. So I know
Oh.
like sometimes they try to embed a lot of the thing in a mindset that, oh, you must teach this. And they don't say, well, okay, what are the things we need to actually stop teaching sometimes in order to accommodate all of the new things that we need to do. So it's very difficult to get persons in the education because again, too, it's people's expertise now. You know, like, what are you making my expertise irrelevant?
Mhm.
They have to know this, they must know this.
Yeah, we
Russ Sakoff has a funny story he tells about being stopped outside a classroom, and a student asked him, he said, wow, how long have you been here? And Russ said, 25 years or something. He says, when did you graduate? And he tells him, and the kid says, are you teaching anything that was taught when you were going to school? And Russ thought and said, no, 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 I'm not. And he says, wow, you must be a really great learner to be able to do that. And then the kid's tagline is, too bad you're not such a great teacher.
Oh.
Another example that learning and teaching are different.
They are.
And as Russ frequently pointed out, the teacher learns way more than any of the students because you have to figure things out to be able to explain it to everybody else. A lot of people who don't understand and some who don't want to understand. And to do that, you have to learn a lot, especially compared to, and you say, okay, so I learned a lot. How did that help them? Don't know for sure.
Well, and then you have to learn about your students and see if you can kind of get them to synthesize what they're learning with their life. And yeah, it's
Yeah,
very complicated.
yeah, yeah.
Or maybe I make it more complicated. I don't know.
Well, that as I said, when the object is delivering curriculum, it's hard, it's hard, it's hard to help students get eager to learn things that somebody's told them they need to know. So they don't have, that doesn't make any sense to them. Why do I need to know that? There's no, I don't have an answer for that. You don't need to know this. You don't need to know anything. I used to tell the algebra kids, because algebra was always an elective. You didn't have to take algebra unless you were going to college or something. But the kid would say, why do we have to learn this? And I said, well, did you enroll in this class because you wanted to be here? Not really. So why'd you enroll? Because my parents said I needed for college. Okay. So the reason you have to learn this is if you don't learn this, you're going to get a bad grade and your parents are going to be mad. That's the reason.
Yeah.
I can go on into all kinds of other stuff that doesn't matter. But I said, you signed up. You don't have to be here. You signed up. Your parents want you to be here. You want to keep them happy, then you should learn this. Not great rationale for getting them motivated, but
Truth hurts sometimes.
yeah, the I don't know if you've read the book. Russ Akoff and somebody else wrote a book together about Sudbury Valley, Sudbury Valley School in somewhere in Minnesota, somewhere in Massachusetts. It's a school with no curriculum. The kids come to the school and they're told they're responsible for their own education. They get to vote on who the staff members are every year, and they can come up with rules or regulations, and they vote on those rules and regulations. And if they pass, that becomes part of the school system. But over and over again, they're told they're responsible for their own education. They can use the staff to learn. They can learn from each other. They can come in and swing on the swings and do nothing else all day, whatever they want to do. And it's been very successful for a long time. And in the beginning, they were nervous about people who were of high school graduation age and wanted to go to college, how they were going to say, I got 4 years of physics and 2 years of chemistry and all that stuff. And most of them could either test to get in by taking the GED or taking a test in a specific subject area. So none of them had trouble getting into school. And I remember reading a part of an essay that a 12-year-old wrote about the fact that he'd been in the school 6 years and hearing that he's responsible for his own education. And evidently just recently the light bulb had gone on. It is the depth of the meaning of that. He said, I finally really now understand what they're talking about. They're telling me I can learn whatever I want to learn, but it's up to me to find somebody who can help me learn that. And so I come here to find somebody, but it's up to me. And I was thinking of that, and I said, he's 12 years old. I got 40-year-olds working for me that don't recognize their responsibilities. So this guy's 12 years old and recognizes his responsibility. I'm responsible for this, and I can do something about it. And I got looking around and saying, wow, if he got nothing else out of that school, that's all he needs.
Okay, I just looked it up. It's going to be on my list.
Yeah, and look up Akoff's name because they wrote the book, and it's sort of a series of essays. So you learn about the school by reading
Okay.
that back and forth.
My coworkers actually sent their kid to a school like that, which I think was really helpful for their student.
I'll bet. I think it's fabulous. I said, wow.
And there's a lot of colleges with that model actually now.
Well, it makes sense because now the learner is at the center. I want to learn this. So now you guys, I want resources to help me learn this. Yeah. Which is way different from telling somebody what they have to learn. What I can't remember who said it. You can't tell anybody anything, but some you can lead to self-discovery. Well, when you tell them the curriculum they need to learn, that's not much in the way of self-discovery there. All right, lady and gentlemen, I presume. We'll see you next week, presuming all the electronics works. I should stop the recording. More record, stop, pause, stop. Okay, I'll post this one. Well, I won't post it. Somebody with talent will post it.